So after laying out your drawing with a pencil sketch, you don't need every detail here. It's really just showing where all the major forms are. I often use the edges as a reference point to try to line things up, matching the proportions of my photo. After you have that pencil drawing, we're going to begin with a monochromatic underpainting. That's why we have this black and white grayscale reference to look at. So what we want to do is set up our palette with any color that I can use to create as that underpainting. The purpose of an underpainting is to create a thin wash of paint that doesn't obscure my pencil lines, but it helps me see all the different values in my composition. So we're going to do that today and then let that dry and begin painting with full color tomorrow. Now my image has a really nice warm springtime feel to the color. So I want to do an underpainting that's going to bring that out. I tend to like to use neutrals for this, but there are some artists that work in color. Caravaggio is famous for his deep red underpaintings. Caravaggio is an artist that really brought a term called chiaroscuro, the Italian term for the play of light and shadow in a work. He really brought that out, and one of the ways he did it is with his red underpaintings. However, what we're going to focus on is really just this idea of monochromatic. It allows our brains to focus on one single color and really only consider value. When you do an underpainting with black and white in grayscale, it's called the Grizz Eye Method, which basically means gray. I'm going to choose my burnt sienna color because this paint, when I look at it, has a warm brown tone to it, versus the burnt umber, which has a cooler brown tone to it. Another great color to use would be like raw sienna or raw umber, as those are a little bit lighter, closer to orange and yellow tones. So what I want to do is consider the layout of my paint palette for painting. I want to use this for the entire painting, so you're going to be putting your raw colors around the edges and mixing in the middle. When you use a color straight out of the tube, I call that the root color. So let's start over here with my neutral paint. Anytime you squeeze out, you just wipe across the lid there and close that. Depending on the quality of paint you have, some paints are going to be thicker or thinner. So a nice heavy body paint is the sign of high quality paint. The next color I will need is white. Notice I'm using a relatively small amount of paint. I can always add more paint, but if you use too much, you're kind of stuck with it on your palette. So what I want to do here is just take this paint and I'm going to use the pure paint tone as my darkest color, and I'm going to use the white to lighten it up, as well as just using water to lighten up. This underpainting is more similar to a watercolor than it is to a traditional acrylic on canvas. Anytime I want to get some paint, I'm going to take my brush, especially a flat like this, I'm going to get some paint and pull it away from the pile. When I pull it away, flip it to the other side, I have a little bit more control over my brush and how the paint is deposited. I also want to keep the paint away from the middle part of the brush if possible. You'll want to clean that from time to time to keep it from building up there. Take a look at your reference photo and determine what are the darkest areas of value and the lightest areas. I'm finding that the distant mountains and some of these areas between the fields are my darkest values, so that's where I'm going to focus first. So I've got my water and paper towel close by. I'm going to go ahead and just start by defining the top of my horizon line. Don't worry about being perfect here because this is going to all shift around as we continue to paint. Notice as I move my brush sideways, I have a little bit more control over the line. I'm going to immediately get some water, and just like watercolor paint, I'm going to spread that around a little bit. Now I'm noticing this is still pretty light, so I'm going to grab more paint and lay this down. Notice as my brush gets dry, we get this speckled texture on the canvas. What that means is I just need to get a little bit more water. A little bit of water is going to spread that out and fill in that canvas texture. Also, by using acrylic paint, kind of like watercolor, it doesn't cover up all of your pencil lines quite as much. So I'm just going in, painting this distant mountain with the value here. Anytime you're done using a brush, never leave it in the water, rinse it out, and then wipe it on the edge of your paper towel. Never leave a brush in the water. It'll ruin the bristles on there. Now I'm going to go with the sky. Now to do this, I want to create a lighter value. So I'm going to just use the same method, a little bit of paint, and mostly water in this case. I really only need to use that white paint if I've accidentally darkened an area too much, or if I want to go back and add highlights. Now my sky is a pretty cloudy sky, so for now I'm not worried about painting individual clouds. Let's just get a basic level of value for your sky that matches the overall look of the sky. Depending on the time of day, some of you may have lighter or darker area close to the horizon, so you may be doing kind of a gradient as you move away from there. Take a look at your reference and follow that. If you mess up an area, this is going to dry pretty fast, so you could wait 20 or 30 minutes, come back and cover it right up. However, if you want to cover a darker color, you'll need to use more white in your paint. But I think this is pretty forgiving here. It doesn't have to be perfect. What matters is we want to help you see your composition a little bit more clearly. If your paintbrush starts to get a little gunked up, what I do is just give it a quick rinse and then wipe it in a pulling motion on that paper towel. By having a clean and controlled brush shape, it's a lot easier to paint. Okay, so this is really enough detail for a painting study like this. My landscape doesn't have a lot of very precise buildings. I don't have any faces to paint. So I really just need this loose underpainting to suggest the textures and values of each area and to give my brain something to really look at when I paint. Now, when I start painting in color, I have a lot more confidence because I'll know that everything is in the right place. When you're done any painting session, it's really important that you wash your brush with soap and water thoroughly until the water runs clear, or over time you'll ruin the brush. And that is true if you walk away for even 15 or 20 minutes. You need to wash the brush with soap. If it's during your painting time, just rinse it and dry it periodically. So that's it for this stage of the underpainting. From here on out, we're going to be working with overlapping. We're going to paint the farthest away things and work our way closer. That means we're going to be painting the sky until it's complete and moving our way down to the distant land, the middle ground, and eventually the foreground. Things that overlap, like in my case, these fence posts or these weeds down here, these are going to be painted last. If you ever mess up with acrylic paint, just let it dry and you can paint right over it.